I was so happy to finally meet Pete's parents. We were already approaching the house and his parents met us on the threshold. When I got a little closer, I could see their faces. Oh my god, they were the very people for whom I agreed to become a surrogate mother and bear their child. Of course, Pete didn't know anything. I had to do this to pay for my younger sister's treatment. Milana needed an emergency kidney transplant. The doctors promised to do their best. But I had to find the money. Our parents had long been dead. There was no one else to help. But the amount of money was huge. Where could I get that much? I was desperate. I spent all day looking out for the jobs and suddenly came across an ad finding a surrogate mother for an elderly couple. A lot of money was offered for this. It should be enough. I got tested, went through some procedures, and very soon, the doctor said, "You are pregnant." I couldn't believe it. I'd done it, but I was willing to do anything to save my sister. When my parents were gone, we were all alone and promised to help each other and stay together. I received a large amount in advance and immediately took the money to the clinic. I didn't tell my boyfriend Pete about anything. I was afraid he would leave me right away, so he didn't notice. I had to lie that I was going out of town for a year, preparing for college. It seemed he believed it. Pete was my first love. I wanted to marry him, and now he introduced me to his parents. It was so exciting. So much for an acquaintance. Who would have thought that I was carrying a child for them? In a panic, I told Pete that I got food poisoning, turned around and ran home. Suddenly the phone rang. It was Pete. I prepared for the worst, but he said that he understood that it had to be exciting to meet the parents of the future husband. Then he added that probably today was not the best option to get acquainted. They recently had a big fight with him because he always hung out until late and his parents were worried and slept badly. After that, Pete offered to help me move out of town, but I insisted that I could handle it myself. The next day, I moved all my things to the country house. As soon as I unpacked, I felt like I already missed Pete, but I checked myself. As long as he didn't find out about my pregnancy, it was the only way I could save our relationship. I had just laid down on the sofa with my book when the doorbell rang. Who was it? In my confusion, I opened the door and saw Pete with a huge suitcase. Pete said he had understood that he wanted to live with me and he wouldn't disturb my getting ready for college. I didn't know what to say. Any girl in my position would have been happy, but I was terrified. He would soon find out about my pregnancy. Nervous, I tried to say that he would be bored here. There was no clubs, no parties. But Pete said not to worry. His friends would be able to come by car. And tonight, there was going to be the first party in honor of housewarming. I was ready to cry. But I decided to tell Pete to go to town right after the party. I needed to be here alone. When the guests were assembled, Pete offered to drink to the hostess. All eyes turned to me. I could barely contain my excitement. I was not allowed to drink alcohol. Nervous, I asked for some water. Pete impatiently responded that he hadn't noticed my craving for a healthy lifestyle before. Then Archie, his best friend, came up to me. I'd only seen him a couple of times before, but I knew everyone thought he was a good guy. And Archie had water in his glass too. He said that for a good mood and fun, you didn't have to drink. But then Pete chimed in and said he knew how to keep me from moping. He brought my favorite Indian food with him. But the smell of the curry made me feel sick, and I immediately ran to the toilet. When I got back, Pete said angrily, "What's wrong with you?" I hesitated and he just turned around and went back to his guests. This was definitely not the time to talk about how I wanted to be alone. Pete was already angry with me, but the right moment to send Pete off didn't come. As days went by, my stomach continued to grow and my hormones turned my mood into a roller coaster. One morning, I woke up in a terrible state. My legs were swollen and it hurt to touch my breasts. And then I saw a missed message on my phone. It was from Pete. Don't forget, it's my parents' wedding anniversary. Call is at 7 p.m. I hope this time the acquaintance will happen. Damn, I promised to go there. Now I definitely couldn't get away with it. So I needed to make sure they didn't recognize me. In desperation, I put on an old stretch-out sweater. I tied a handkerchief over my head and put on sunglasses. Pete came back and glared at me. Was I going to wear this? But I hastily replied that there was no time to change. Pete's parents were looking at each other strangely all through dinner. Did they recognize me after all? And in the end, his mother said that they had good news. Soon, they would have a child. Pete was taken aback. He didn't understand how this was possible at her age. But his mother stammered out that they had found an excellent surrogate mother and she was already carrying his future brother or sister. So they didn't realize it was me. And then Pete remarked with a chuckle that only idiots would agree to carry someone else's child for money. What did he understand? I screamed that he was wrong, and barely holding back my tears, I ran out into the street. Pete caught up with me and told me that he was finally tired of my whims. You know, we'd better separate and take a break from each other, he said. What? Pete added that he wanted to stay with his friend Archie, the guy from the party, for a week. It hurt me to hear that, but maybe it was even better. Because if we broke up, Pete wouldn't see my stomach grow. At home, Pete packed up his things and left immediately. Archie was waiting for him outside the house. I went to take a bath to relax. Then I heard a noise in the hallway. Was Pete back? All my things were in the bedroom. He was going to see my stomach. I threw on a robe and decided to sneak into the living room. Holding my breath, I tried to move as quietly as possible, but I could hardly move my swollen legs. And then I saw Archie, that friend of Pete's, standing in front of me, stunned. He awkwardly explained that Pete had forgotten his t-shirt and asked him to pick it up so he wouldn't have to see me. He looked down at my stomach. It was perfectly visible under the robe. Hell, he was going to tell Pete now. I felt dizzy with fear, and I started to fall. Archie immediately ran to me and helped me sit down on the sofa. Tears welled up in my eyes. Archie, I didn't mean to deceive anyone. And then I told him that I was carrying someone else's child to save my sister. After that, Archie stared at one point for a long time and was silent. I shouldn't have laughed. But then he said that the words had made him shiver. He said that if something happened to his loved one, he would also do everything to help. Then Archie noticed that my legs were very swollen. He said that when his mother was pregnant with his little brother, he often massaged her, and he offered to help me. I was taken aback, but agreed. My legs really hurt wildly, and just as Archie started massaging me, I heard, "What's taking Archie so long?" And suddenly Pete was in the room. In a rage, he shouted that he wasn't the least bit surprised that I was already cheating on him. "Pete, wait! You got it wrong!" I thought the world had collapsed. What would happen now? I kept calling Pete for the next week, but it seemed he banned me. I was in a terrible state, but I knew that I needed to pull myself together, at least for the sake of my sister Milana. I tried to get out of bed, and then I heard footsteps downstairs. Pete? But it was Archie. He brought me a whole bag of fruit. I asked him about Pete. Was he still mad at me? Then Archie took my hand and told me that I didn't need Pete. Everything would be fine and Archie would take care of me. But Pete just got it wrong. I didn't cheat on him. I was only carrying a baby for my sister, and it had been so long since I had visited her in the hospital. And suddenly Archie said, "Then what are you waiting for? Let's go." I was sad to think that Pete had never been so interested in her. Pete would always say, "You need to switch," and invite me to another party. I agreed, and Archie and I went to the hospital, and only when I entered the room, I saw that my little sister finally came to her senses. But the doctor, standing next to Milana's bed, told me not to be too happy. Milana's condition was unstable, and the new organ might not establish, but the main thing was, she was already awake. Archie and I visited Milana almost every day. Everything seemed to be going well. She was rapidly getting better. At first, I was a little worried about how my sister would accept Archie, but it seemed that they quickly got along. They spent hours together discussing comics and drawing superhero makeup. I was so happy. I was surprised to see that I seemed to be getting attached to Archie too. We were on our way back from the hospital one day, and Archie asked me to stop by for dinner at a cafe. I hesitated because this was Pete's favorite place. I didn't know what to do, but I thought the whole Pete thing was in the past, and I agreed to go there anyway. As soon as we ordered, Archie, embarrassed, said that he had been very fond of me for a long time. I was confused, but Archie added that there was no way he could admit it. Because of Pete, I felt my cheeks flush. And at that moment, I saw Pete enter the cafe. He had his arm around some blonde girl. How dare he? Then I got a message on my phone. It was from the hospital. The doctor wrote that the kidney still did not establish, and Milana urgently needed a new donor. I tried to get up, and suddenly I felt that my water seemed to break. The ground dropped away under my feet again, and I fell into the darkness. I woke up in the hospital. Archie was nowhere to be found, and neither was the baby. What about Milana? God, what's going on? But then the door swung open, and Pete's parents came in, cheering, clutching a small baby bundle to their chest. The doctor also handed me some kind of superhero badge. It was Milana's favorite badge. What did it mean? The doctor said that my sister had already recovered from the second surgery and even asked to pass me this badge as a sign of gratitude. I didn't understand anything. We made it? When did they find a donor? The doctor looked at me in surprise and said that it was my friend who gave his kidney. Archie? The doctor looked at the chart and nodded. Tears streamed down my cheeks. A month later, Milana, Archie, and I went to the ocean. I looked at the waves and thought how great it was when the difficulties were in the past. And now there was a new happy life ahead of the three of us. I turned to Archie and said, "Thank you, Archie. You're my superhero." Milana smiled cheerfully. By the way, the girl I gave birth to was named Milana. We sometimes visit her with the whole family. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I struggled with all my strength, but they laid me on the sacrificial altar. No, please, let me go. Mom. Dad, why don't you interfere? The freako was already reaching for my throat. Is this the end? And I had so many plans for my new life. It all started when we moved here. On the first day, I told the whole class that I wanted to be a class president, and no one seemed to like it. My classmates called me an upstart and locked me in the locker room after class. I thought I was going to stay there until morning, but my classmate Kurt rescued me. He said that he was also locked in the school closet. After that, Kurt began to choke. I was so scared. He took the inhaler out of his pocket, but his hands were shaking so badly that he dropped it. I immediately picked it up and gave it to Kurt. When he felt better, he said that he was excited by the memory of the closet. From stress, he sometimes had asthma attacks. Afterward, Kurt walked me home. I was in a great mood. I think I had a friend. And I told him he could come to me whenever he wanted. In the evening, when we were going to have dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Kurt, with his parents. It was strange that Kurt came unannounced, and with his parents, but I was glad to see him anyway, and invited them inside. Over dinner, my parents and Kurt became very friendly. They gave us a book about the Aztecs and invited us to the book club. They said that at the next meeting there, they would discuss how sacrifices helped enlightenment. I thought it was very strange to discuss such a thing in a quiet suburb, but my parents really liked it at the club. They began to disappear there and made many friends. After one meeting, my mother brought a bottle of red, smelly liquid and said it was a rabbit blood. Yes, that's what I believe. Not funny at all, Mom. But at dinner, she put it in my face. She said it was good for the body and soul. I flatly refused to drink it. A couple of days later, Kurt called and invited us to spend a weekend at his family estate. All the members of the book club would be there. My parents were happy, and I didn't want to go to the fart party. I was afraid of hurting Kurt. Besides, I'd never been to the family estates, so I agreed. Kurt's country house was huge, a whole castle in the middle of the forest, surrounded by a high fence. Near the entrance, the guards asked me to hand over my phone. Kurt explained that otherwise, the internet would distract from live communication. I had to give my phone to these big guys. We were invited to lunch. I saw huge tables with white tablecloths and my parents at one of the tables. They motioned for me to sit next to them. What a solemn atmosphere. I hope they bring me something delicious. I'm so hungry. But they brought us glasses with a thick red liquid. I immediately refused to drink it. Then some crazy old man started yelling at me, saying that I didn't respect the traditions of the community. It was the elixir of youth, rabbit blood. So Mom wasn't kidding. To drink blood? No way. I won't. Are you crazy? The guards immediately grabbed me and led me out from the table. What's going on here? I called my parents, but they didn't even turn around. I tried to pull away, but my vision suddenly blurred. I woke up in a rabbit cage. How did this happen? I panicked, but I couldn't move. The cage was so cramped. My whole body ached from the awkward position. Why are you doing this to me? Suddenly, Kurt appeared out of the darkness with a bunch of keys. He saved me again. I started to run, but Kurt stopped me. It turns out that I insulted all the members of the club by not drinking rabbit blood. It was sacred, and the rejection of it promised the whole community misfortune. What nonsense! Kurt said that he was scared himself. There was nothing like this at the previous meetings. But it was too dangerous to run now. The whole area was guarded and we'd better think about how to pass unnoticed. He was probably right. Kurt led me into the house. They were all wearing animal masks, moving rhythmically to some strange music. A man in a mask with horns came up to me and asked me if I realized everything. I immediately asked for forgiveness. After that, I was told that I would have to make amends tomorrow. The community had already found some kind of task for me. In the morning, all the guests dragged some heavy iron cases out of the basement and put them in the cars. I was already exhausted. Suddenly, I stumbled and dropped one case. My parents immediately shouted at me to be careful. When everyone left for lunch, I decided to find out what was so valuable inside these cases. I opened one of them, and there were bloody human organs inside. Heart, lungs. I touched it with trembling hands. They were so cold and slimy. I almost threw up. I've got to get out of here. I couldn't find a place until nightfall. I flinched at every rustle, afraid that someone would come for me. I was beginning to think Kurt had left me. He knocked on my door after midnight. Kurt found a gap in the fence, and we needed to run right now. We were almost to the fence when I heard the guard's footsteps. They were getting closer. Damn it. We hid behind the rose bushes. The thorns bit painfully into my arms. I couldn't help but cry out. The guard immediately pointed his flashlight at us. This was the end. Then Kurt picked up a rock from the ground and threw it in the direction of the road. The guard turned around and headed there. And we ran as fast as we could. When the estate was already far away, we decided to take a break. I had no strength left and it was terribly hot. We sat down on a fallen tree and Kurt took off his hoodie. His inhaler fell out of his pocket. I picked it up and was about to put it back when I saw the phone light up in his pocket. Kurt, where is it from? Kurt, are you with them? I jumped up and backed away. And Kurt gave me a nasty smile. I was paralyzed with fear. I ran with the last of my strength, and everything went dark. I woke up on Kurt's shoulder. He was dragging me deeper into the woods. My hands were bound by his hoodie. Let me go! I tried to pull away, but he only got angry. He said that I was honored to be chosen, that my kidneys and heart would serve the stronger and more worthy. Then I remembered the organs in the cases. I started kicking and screaming for him to let me go, but it was no use. He wasn't listening to me. Just then, Kurt carried me out into a large clearing. In the middle was a huge bonfire, next to which was an altar. It was surrounded by people in white robes, the same guests I'd seen at dinner. As soon as they noticed Kurt, they bowed oddly in front of us. For a moment, it was very quiet. Even rabbits in the huge cases did not make a sound. 2 guards grabbed me and dragged me to the altar. No, please, don't. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed my parents among the cultists. Mom, Dad, why don't you do anything? But they didn't even look in my direction. Their eyes were fixed on Kurt, who was following me regally. I was forced down on the altar, and the rope was tightly tied around my arms. I was shouting for them to let me go. But then Kurt came up to me and the cultists started shouting his name. No, Kurt! Don't you dare touch me! His face was covered in sweat, and his hands were reaching for my throat, second by second, getting closer and closer. When suddenly, he coughed and began to choke. This was my chance. I struggled to free my hand. Isn't that what you're looking for? I was clutching the inhaler Kurt had dropped on the way. Let me go and you'll get it back. Kurt was frantically gasping for air. He just toppled over from suffocation. In the end, he turned pale and grabbed a huge cage to keep from falling. With his last breath, he nodded so that they released me. After the guards took the ropes off me, I threw the inhaler with all my might somewhere in the darkness of the night. Holding his throat, Kurt followed, disappearing into the trees. And then the cultists began to surround me. Their eyes glittered from under their hoods. I couldn't find a single drop of humanity in them. Cultists were coming from all sides. It felt like they were going to tear me apart with their hands. I was trapped. Their hands were almost touching me. But when they came close, then they suddenly dropped to their knees. My father said that I had taken power from the last priest, and from that day on, they would worship me. The cultists fell silent at my feet, waiting for the order. What a turn! I turned to where Kurt was crawling in the dark. What a pathetic rabbit. Grab him, I ordered.
In a live video on Instagram, I took the baby out of the crib, and at the same time showed my followers my perfect tummy. I was asked how I got my perfect body back so quickly after giving birth. Well, I'll tell you about my super diet in the next live video. I turned off the camera and handed the baby to my nanny Lena in disgust. Lena, put him away. He stinks. Who gave birth to him at all? Couldn't they have given birth to a prettier baby? I hate children, but this is a hype topic. So a year ago, I decided to find a surrogate mother. She did all the dirty work while I posted pictures with a fake belly in stories. Speaking of fake bellies, I asked Lena to throw them out immediately to make room in the closet for new clothes. And don't forget to clean up. The house is full of dust. But she replied that she would not do this. She had other duties. She was a nanny, not a cleaner. No way. Servants are servants. I threatened Lena that I would fire her if she didn't complete the assignment. With that, Lena obediently left the room. There were a couple of hours left before the next live video, so I quickly put on the short top that exposed my toned tummy. Everything was going great until one of the followers left a comment. Kiss, your stomach has terrible fat rolls. What fat rolls? But then I was flooded with comments that I would better look in the mirror first, and then stream. It hit me like an electric shock. I quickly got my bearings and said that I had technical problems. I interrupted the live video and in fear, rushed to the mirror. I thought it was the light, but no. My stomach really did look bigger, and there were some nasty fat rolls. What the hell was going on? Okay, calm down. I googled what the reason of fast weight gain could be. The portal about an inconspicuous pregnancy was the first to open in the search results, and I clicked on it. I hadn't had a boyfriend in a long time. I spent all my time on Instagram, but reading the forum, I came across some wild information that one girl got knocked up in a pool. Maybe it's the same for me. I go to the pool. I put on the first hoodie I saw and rushed to the doctor's office. The doctor did an ultrasound and said that there was no pregnancy, but there was a slight obesity in the waist area. Slight obesity? I said that I had a proper diet, and I had a couple of servants preparing everything for me. This couldn't be happening. The doctor replied that many patients ate their problems in a half-asleep state and then did not remember anything about it. I walked out of the clinic. Everything was a blur. Was I a lunatic? I couldn't think straight. I was necessary to understand everything as soon as possible, so I decided to experiment, and for this, I rushed to the store. There, with trembling hands, I picked up a jar of Nutella from the shelf. I wanted to leave it in the refrigerator overnight and see if the jar was open in the morning. What if I really went to the refrigerator at night, half asleep, and ate? A shiver ran down my spine, as if someone was watching me. Haters would destroy me if they saw what I was buying here. But some weird chick at the checkout was staring at Nutella and then at me. After a couple of seconds, she shouted loudly, "Nancy Kiss also likes sweets." God, that was the last thing I needed. I threw the money to the cashier and covering my face with my hands, literally ran to the parking lot. But this crazy chick rushed after me with the phone in her hands. No, don't you dare shoot me. I got caught in someone's car and almost fell. And the alarm went off all over the parking lot. After running another 100 meters, I found my car. Chick was not far behind. I sat behind the wheel and peeled out, almost grazing her. When I came home, I looked so bad that Nanny Lena immediately asked anxiously what had happened. Taking a deep breath, I told her about the crazy woman in the store. Lena hugged me and said that was the downside of fame. Lena used to dream of meeting me on the street too. Now she worked in my house. I took a deep breath and calmed down a little. Thank God I hid my face from the follower. But the phone started bursting with notifications. They poured one after another. Hundreds of users marked me on some photo. With growing anxiety, I opened the post and saw myself from behind. The sweatshirt I accidentally grabbed turned out to be a branded sweatshirt with my Instagram nickname at Nancy Kiss. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I looked fat in that photo. Very fat. They wrote that I was just a fatso. And my diet was a complete fraud. Followers began to unfollow one by one. My Instagram was already emptying. My life was collapsing before my eyes, and my stomach was getting bigger. I didn't know what was going on, and it was driving me crazy. Lying in bed, I didn't scroll through my Instagram feed for the first time in my life, but instead hoped to get to sleep and forget about this nightmare. All night I dreamed that I swelled up like a huge balloon and finally burst. The pop woke me up. There was a sticky cold sweat on my forehead. Getting out of bed, I immediately looked at my stomach. It already really looked like a pregnant woman's. I rushed to the refrigerator, but the Nutella wasn't touched. And I saw a missed call from John, my agent. Trying not to panic, I called back. John was casual, but he was trying to find out why my sweatshirt with my nickname was so tight around my sides. I made excuses that it was just an angle. The sweatshirt shrank after washing. John reminded me of the live video I'd promised my followers. In 3 days, I had to talk about my diet in a stream with advertising partners. 3 days before the live video. It was urgent to do something with the stomach. I worked myself out and drank only the hot water Lena left at my door. But no matter how hard I tried, there were fewer followers. And I got fatter and fatter. Soon I couldn't even fit into a tracksuit. When I was a few hours away from the live video, I realized that my methods were not working. Then I rushed to the shapewear store. Instagram had not paid for a week. There was still some money on the card. I bought a huge corset with it. I couldn't believe I was buying it for myself. When I got home, I laced myself so hard I could barely breathe, but I still struggled into my widest hoodie. I was completely broken, but I gathered my strength, chose a good angle, and started the live video. As soon as I was live streaming, the haters immediately bombarded me with comments that I not only had a stomach, but also my brain was swollen with fat. They were furious that I decided to show up on Instagram in such a form, wrote that they were disappointed in me. I could not resist, interrupted stream and began to sob in the next room. A child immediately began to cry. Lena came in and told me that there was always a chance to make things right. Maybe I just needed to change my attitude. I emotion screamed that she was not hired to be a smartass, so she could get out of my house. When she left, I sat down at my laptop to play Bubble Shooter to calm down. And wow, I saw a dozen letters from advertisers. Finally, they showed up. But there were reports that all contracts with me were finally terminated. I was out of money. With trembling hands, I dialed my agent. What am I going to do now, John? He was silent. And then with a sigh, he said that he had to stop working with me. Will you leave me too? At this, he sarcastically congratulated with the second baby and hung up. I needed a distraction, so I decided to take a walk. I don't know how long I wandered around the city, but when I got home, I saw that the door to the apartment was wide open. Where was Lena? Damn, how could I forget? I sent her away myself. The apartment was a complete ruin. Clothes, some garbage, and dirty diapers were scattered everywhere. The smell was just awful, and from the room came the heart-rending cry of a child. What am I supposed to do about it? I ran to the baby as fast as I could. Leo, What's wrong with you? I tried to feed him, and suddenly I realized he was so small and helpless. I began to sob softly in despair and the realization of a new feeling. My God, this was my baby, even though he was carried by another woman. How could I be so indifferent? Suddenly, Leo held out his hands to me. My heart skipped a beat. I realized that now we were the only ones who had each other, and I held him tightly to my heart and whispered it to him softly. Leo seemed to understand me and smiled sadly in response. After a few weeks, I couldn't imagine my life without Leo. I also posted photos with him, but I forgot about building a following. Surprisingly, my audience began to grow by itself. By the way, I also lost weight pretty quickly. I still don't understand what happened to my stomach. I was feeding Leo once, and I saw a comment under my Instagram photo. Lena was on the avatar. She wrote that she was glad that I gave up the fake life. Already in the PM, Lena admitted that every day she mixed high-calorie supplements in my food. It made me fat so fast. I was angry and wanted to write her something spiteful in response. After all, it was Lena who made me understand that even if all the people in the world turned their backs on me, I would still be the kindest and most beautiful person in the world. And this is my son, Leo. That morning, I was woken up by a call from my dream company. The boss really liked my resume, and I was called for an interview. Hooray! But I needed to get ready. The interview's in 3 hours. I quickly put on a blouse, a self-made miniskirt, and Jimmy Choo shoes. By noon, I was already in the company building. But due to traffic jams, I had only 5 minutes left before the meeting. I rushed to the elevator. But hell, it was broken. In desperation, I even glanced at the stairs. But climbing to the 45th floor in shoes was not an option. A scowling man in an expensive suit who was standing nearby cursed and said that there was a freight elevator at the other end of the building and went there. I and Beauty with great hair followed him. There was another guy near the freight elevator. He smiled at me, so cute and positive. His face looked familiar. The doors opened. I hesitated for a second. I was scared to go alone with 3 men in this gloomy elevator. I looked at my watch. Only a minute left to get to the 45th floor. There was no choice. Inside, the cabin didn't look like much, and the elevator was clearly rarely used. We were going awfully slow, and I couldn't help but give every stranger in the elevator a nickname. The one who brought us here, very confused, was Nerd. I'd already given Beauty a nickname, and the one at the elevator was Pretty. It was probably the 100th time I looked at my watch. 12:05, that's it, I'm late. Now my career was over. I was so upset. Suddenly, the cabin swayed violently and I couldn't resist falling on top of Pretty. The elevator stopped. Beauty immediately started freaking out and pressed the button to call the dispatcher. But no one answered him. The elevator stood still. Nerd tried to calm us down, said that he already got stuck in this building, and we could be released soon. I took out my phone, but there was no connection. Nerd also checked and said that it looked like there was no signal in this damn elevator. Damn it, looked like we were trapped. 10 minutes passed, but the elevator didn't move. Nerd thoughtfully said that it was strange. It should not be so. The elevator might have been seriously damaged. I felt uneasy. Beauty started whining that he would sue these repairmen and everyone in this building. He slammed his fist into the speaker. That's nervous. I cried out in surprise, and Nerd suggested that maybe the connection in the elevator was damaged during braking. But it still needed to be fixed. We were waiting. I felt terrible around 3 men I didn't know. At one point, I thought I was suffocating. Suddenly, the elevator creaked loudly and jerked down. We flew several floors, and I already said goodbye to life. In the end, the cap braked and we fell to the floor. I hit the floor so hard and saw that I had broken the heel of my expensive shoes. Heck! Beauty stopped yelling, and now he was silently shaking with fear. Nerd was swearing loudly, and Pretty pressed himself against the wall and gripped the railing with his fingers. The elevator rocked and creaked softly. It seemed that one careless movement and it would collapse. Besides, I thought I smelled smoke. I got scared and started shaking. Pretty came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. He started saying that everything was fine and we would manage. Finally, we heard some static and the dispatcher's voice. There is a fire in the building. I repeat, there's a fire in the building. Don't panic. Help is on the way. Immediately, the connection was cut off. I was afraid that we were lost and I started banging on the elevator door with all my might, but Nerd stopped me. We heard again from the speaker, "We'll get you out. Don't try to open the elevator door yourself." Then the dispatcher went offline again. Beauty started yelling that the Mercedes he borrowed was parked right in front of the building, and that he had to save his car. Nerd shut him up and suggested that we follow the instructions if we want to wait for rescuers. We need to sit on the floor, so there's more chance of not suffocating. We all slid down, and sure enough, there was less of a burning smell. While Nerd was thinking about something in silence, Pretty tried to distract me. He asked me about everything, joked, but then his gaze lingered on my face. He stopped abruptly and swallowed. His eyes were blazing madly. That look sent a chill down my spine. And the Nerd abruptly blurted out that we needed to get ourselves out. We would probably run out of oxygen before the rescue team found us, especially if we continued to panic. We needed to open the elevator doors. Nerd quickly got to his feet and began to pull off the handrail to use it as a lever for the doors. The elevator shook again. We were going to crash. Pretty tried to stop him, but he didn't want to listen to anyone. Then he put his hand on his shoulder. But Nerd threw it off and said, "Don't touch me, okay?" He looked menacing and Pretty immediately retreated. Damn, I was so scared. I said that the fight would only make the oxygen run out faster and that we should work together. Although Pretty was on edge, he agreed. It did work out to tear off the handrail. We were doomed. I looked at Beauty. He was sweating and gasping for breath. He became hysterical that he was not ready to die. After all, he took the Mercedes on credit to impress the girl and admit his love to her. But he never got the chance. What's wrong with you guys? One almost got into a fight, the other won't shut up about his Mercedes. I suddenly felt bad. My head started to spin and I felt sick. Was I going to die here without getting help? Nerd asked me if I had something in my purse that I could hook a trapdoor in the ceiling. The smoke was getting worse. I barely forced myself to rummage in my bag and gave Nerd a nail file. What if this was the only chance of salvation? Nerd got his feet on the rail and started to pry the hatch with my nail file. And the lid gave way! Nerd ordered me to climb on his shoulders and into the hatch to look around. Well, no, there was no way I was going to sit on that dude's shoulder in my short skirt. Pretty told him to stay out of my way. Nerd gritted his teeth, then jumped up, clung to the hatch, and climbed it himself. Pretty asked if I was alright, and I thanked him for his help. At some point, our eyes met, and again I saw that predatory look. His face was getting closer. He clearly wanted to kiss me. What? I tried to push him away, but he leaned over my ear, breathed languidly, and began to whisper. He said he didn't recognize me right away, but he remembered. What did it mean? He tried to kiss me again. And this time I pushed him away so hard and turned to Beauty. But he was hurtled in the corner sobbing. Cowardly brute. Pretty didn't seem so cute anymore. His gaze became crazy. I suddenly remembered him. I looked him squarely in the eye and shouted, "Damn, so it's you who's that fat guy that I've been pushing away all the time. Yes, I didn't recognize you." He began to move slowly again. And then I looked into his eyes and shouted, "I remember you. You're Jack. You were disgusting to me, and you haven't changed at all." My words seemed to throw him into shock. He froze and stared at one point without moving. Looks like I've got him restrained. At that moment, I heard Nerd from the hatch. He said that there was an exit upstairs, but someone needed to help him get to it. I didn't care about the short skirt just to get out of there. I asked Nerd to give me a hand, and when he held it out, I started climbing up on the roof. The steel ropes creaked dangerously as I climbed through the open hatch. I saw that one of them was almost torn off. On the roof, I looked around. The door to the floor was high up. Nerd said I should climb up the steel ledges and call for help. But why me? He threatened me and said that he would lug me up there if I didn't get in. Coward! He was just afraid to fall out of there. I balked and said I wouldn't climb. Nerd was furious and had swung at me. When suddenly we heard dispatcher's voice. After 5 seconds, the elevator starts to descend. The countdown started.
I wanted to go down to the cab, but Nerd pushed me roughly away and jumped down. The lid slammed shut and I couldn't open it. I begged him to open it, but Nerd just left me. The elevator jerked and began to climb up. Smoke suddenly poured out of the shaft. I almost fell off the floor, barely able to keep my balance. I thought I was going to fall. Suddenly, one of the cables snapped and the elevator stood still again. Oh no! The smoke was already everywhere, and I could barely breathe. I saw that they were trying to open the door upstairs. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself up the remaining rope and climbed up. Save me! I need help! The smoke was so thick and acrid. I tried not to pass out. My eyes were already closing and I was about to fall when I suddenly felt someone dragging me up. I was coming to my senses. And at some point, I got another call from the same firm and was asked to come for an interview. After everything that happened to me that day, I just had to get to their office. This time I put on sneakers and walked all 45 floors. I knocked on the door to my boss's office. And when I opened the door, Nerdo seemed as surprised as I was sitting at the table. I abruptly closed the door. I've had enough.
I'm a psychic. My gift is to heal with my hands. But this time, the client was special, Bill White. He wanted to get rid of the memories that tormented him terribly. I touched him, but suddenly, everything went dark. At that moment, a strange vision came to me. Someone is approaching my mom. She runs to the stairs, wants to go down. And then, I saw that my mom was lying on the steps unconscious. And up there was Bill White, my client. The vision ended in a bright flash, and I went blind. Panicked, I called out to him, but all I heard was the door slam. He ran away. I was terrified. It was pitch black, and I couldn't even make out the outlines of objects. And the last thing I saw was my mom's murder. What happened? Everyone in town knew I could heal, but I've never had a vision. I just helped people get rid of their pain. And that's all. Although my own pain hasn't gone away for years, it was different. For as long as I can remember, I have been tormented by the question, who is responsible for the death of my mom? It happened when I was 6. I only vaguely remembered crying over my mom's body, and then the policeman took me to the orphanage. After a few years of living in the orphanage, I realized I had a gift. At first, I healed children in the orphanage, and after graduation, I was given an apartment. There I received patients. Those who were recovering told each other about it, and people began to come to me from all over the city. Apparently, Bill White came to me the same way, and it seems that in our session, I discovered the ability to see the past. Perhaps Bill knew something about my mom's murder. I was trying to figure out how to find him. All I remembered about him was a mole above his upper lip, just like mine. Then I thought of Matt, the cop I'd helped with a terrible migraine. I should call him. But it was difficult to move by touch. I was constantly dropping something or hitting the corners of the furniture. There was darkness everywhere. Finally, I found my phone by touch and went to contacts from memory. I started calling everyone and finally heard Matt's voice on the phone. It worked. I told him about the strange client and my vision on my mom's death. But Matt said that he was suspended from the service and no longer engaged in investigations. At that moment, all my hopes were dashed. I had no one else to turn to. An hour passed, 2 hours, and all of a sudden, Matt called me back. He said that he had thought it over and was ready to help. And he had his reasons. Matt said that when he was working as a detective, his wife was killed. He tried to find the culprit himself, collected evidence, and found the address of the person. But in the end, he didn't have time to arrest him. The killer committed suicide. After that, Matt couldn't do business like he used to, and he retired. Every killer must be punished. Matt finished. An hour later, he was at my house. Matt asked for my laptop to hack into the police database. After a long search, we found the street where Bill White lived. Matt was trying to get the house number. But suddenly, the system blocked us. Heck, at least we had a lead. In the evening, we reached the outskirts of the city. We had to look for White here. We went to all the houses on the street. No one heard of Bill. We were already going back. Then Matt noticed the house with boarded up windows. We got closer and went up to the porch, and suddenly,
I felt dizzy. I grabbed a railing and the vision came to me again. Fake images appeared and I realized that Bill White was definitely here. We had to get inside the house. Matt kept saying that there was a patrol running around the area, and if we got caught, we'd be arrested for breaking and entering. But I said that I would go alone or with him. I would get into this house. Matt sighed heavily and agreed. With a terrible crash, he broke off a couple of boards at the entrance to the house. I froze. Did someone hear us? We quickly went inside. I asked Matt to stay close while I read White's energy. I felt the walls and the remaining furniture in the rooms, and hoped that another vision would come to me. Suddenly, Matt stopped. He said that there was a photo on the wall. There's a man with a girl. She looks like you. Matt chuckled. He took the picture down from the wall, and I picked it up. Another flash. A vision. Someone gives me a toy and then I heard a car drive up to the house with the siren on. Let's go, Matt whispered to me, and a second later, there was a terrible crash as the cops broke into the house. I hesitated, but Matt grabbed my arm, and we ran as fast as we could. I heard a cop chasing us, but at the last moment, Matt pushed him away and we ran out of the house. I was exhausted, but Matt said we couldn't stop. Only when we were far enough away did he call a taxi. All the way, I clutched that picture in my hands, but the vision didn't appear. I asked Matt to describe the man in the photo. White cheekbones, a mole near the lips, Matt said. It was Bill White. I remembered that he had the same mole as me. I asked Matt to take the photo to the station and find out something about White. Who was this girl? Maybe she would give us another clue. Matt said he wasn't welcome at the police station, but he tried to do something. Matt didn't answer his phone the next day, and it wasn't until late afternoon that he called. It turned out that he was detained, and he was in the police station. He was turned in by the same cop who ran after us. Matt said he would only be released on bail. Hell, I was the one who put him where he used to put criminals. I had to help him. I groped my way to the locker where I kept my savings and took out all the money. I hoped that would be enough. With difficulty, I got out of the house and went to the sound of cars on the highway. I had never hitched a ride blindly before. Finally, some guy took pity and agreed to give me a ride. When Matt was released, I told him I couldn't ask for his help anymore. If he got caught again, he could be sent to prison. But Matt said that we would see this through. Together, he swore on his police honor that he would not back down. Oh, Matt. He also said that while he was in the police station, he found out something. The man in the photo was really Bill White. Matt hesitated a little. He sighed heavily and said that Bill was my father. No way. So the girl in the photo with him was me? Resentment seethed inside me. How could he leave me? I was beginning to think that White had something to do with my mom's death. Why else would he run away after she was killed? The next morning, we drove to one of the poor neighborhoods where White might be. Matt talked to the beggars, but no one knew anything. We were about to leave. But then a ragamuffin said he knew White. For a couple of dollars, he told us that this strange White recently lived in an abandoned building. And then I felt he was right. White was very close. I followed my gut. Matt and I went down to the basement of a house, and the feeling grew stronger. White was here. I called his name and immediately heard quick footsteps. White decided to run away again. Police! Freeze! Matt shouted and ran after Bill. Matt quickly caught up with him. I heard him push Bill to the floor and then the handcuffs clicked. Bill was breathing heavily and no longer struggling. Then Matt began the interrogation. White admitted that all his life he was tormented by a conscience for what he did to his wife. He hoped that the psychic would help him get rid of the heartache, but I felt bad, and he was afraid. We were fighting. I pushed my wife and she fell down the stairs. White said painfully. I still hate myself for running away. For leaving my daughter. I tried to find her, but without success. I'd like to know how is she now. White finished. I was shaking and couldn't speak. But in the end, I decided. Bill.
I'm the girl you left behind. I'm your daughter." There was a tense silence. A moment later, Bill burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Tears began to run down my cheeks too, and I realized that I bared no grudge against Bill, and suddenly, I've got my sight back. Unbelievable. Seeing the world again was a miracle. And I realized that as soon as I forgave my father, my illness went away. It's like I've been given a second chance to make things right. I didn't know what to do next. Matt was waiting for me to call the cops because my dad had actually killed my mom. But I wasn't in a hurry to get my phone out. All my life I've wanted to punish a murderer, but do I want it now? It was the worst day of my life. Me, mom, and dad were in the courtroom. They were getting divorced. My mother sued my father for half of his money and found another man. How could she? The jury were whispering and pointing at dad. Yes, he's special. He has a rare disease. At the age of 13, he stopped growing, and he looks like a teenager all his life. They should be ashamed. To forget this nightmare, we moved. Dad, despite the fact that mother sued half of the state, continued to successfully run his business. He's awesome. I went to a private school with an emphasis on literature, and of course, on the first day, the local teacher confused my father with a schoolboy. She yelled at us like we were skipping school. The next day, my dad decided to please me. It was almost Christmas, and he brought gorgeous Christmas tree with beautiful decorations and garlands to the school hall. It looked like a jewelry boutique on a tree. When that teacher, Amber, saw dad with the tree, she immediately understood everything. She started to apologize for that yesterday's confuse. Well, of course, my kind dad made a joke of it and continued to chat with her sweetly. My dad just doesn't hold a grudge. Lucky for you, Amber. Christmas dinner was coming up and dad called the guests, though didn't say whom. I decided to show off and prepared my signature dish, a ham. The evening promised to be fabulous, but I definitely didn't expect such guests. Amber was standing in front of me with a festive ham in her hands. Is this a joke? When did she and dad get so close? I wanted to please dad with my signature ham, but he tried her dish first and even praised it. The evening was ruined. But gifts always lifted my spirits. By the fireplace, my dad handed me an expensive Parker pen that I'd been dreaming about for a long time, but I didn't dare ask for it. Cool. And Amber, dad invited her to a concert. No way! It seems that it was going to be a real date. In the evening, dad went to this concert and didn't return home at night. Did he really stay with Amber? In the early morning, dad showed up as if nothing had happened and took me to school. Amber was waiting for us in the school parking, and then I saw her, returning dad's watch. Everything was confirmed. I sadly trudged to class. When I came in, everyone was giggling, and there was a drawing of dad and Amber all over the blackboard, and it had inscriptions saying teachers in love with a youngster, so the whole school knew about it. Because of meetings with the teacher and workload, dad spent very little time with me. And finally came her special day with dad. We usually go to the mall, watch movies, shop, and have fun. Just him and I. We went to another boutique. I picked up a bunch of clothes and went to the fitting room. But when I came out, dad wasn't there. I was really scared. But a few minutes later, he returned with the kitten in his arms. I couldn't even dream of this. But of course, the gift wasn't for me. We took Fuzzy to Amber's. I was starting to hate her. I tried to tell my father that they weren't a couple, but he wouldn't listen. Amber this, Amber that. She got into her family and no one even asked me because she's perfect. No one's perfect. She opened the door all dressed up. And from her conversation with dad, I realized that they were going to a restaurant. Yeah, now I know why she's dressed up like this. I pretended to be a nice girl and offered to babysit the cat while they were at a restaurant, although I had other plans. As soon as the door closed behind them, I decided to look around. But then Fluffy began to pitifully meow. Apparently it was hungry. I decided to feed it and opened the cupboard to get food, but instead, I found a box. It was a bunch of dad's notices. Wow, our Miss Perfect was drowning in dads. I turned on Sherlock mode and went to her bedroom. There was a laptop next to her bed. I can definitely find something interesting there. Bingo! There was our sweet Amber's messages to a friend saying she really needed money. What's this? Is this a link to dad's company's website? Here you are.
I heard the sound of an approaching car outside the window, but when the door opened, all I saw was Amber. Dad was called to another emergency meeting. I don't know who was more upset, me or the teacher. To give Amber her due, she played her part well, even offering to give me a ride home. She never stopped talking during the ride, and in the end, she suddenly gave out that she loved my dad. What kind of a liar was she? I told her what I thought and ran away. I was so disgusted. I tossed and turned all night, and I don't even remember when I fell asleep. In the morning, I was woken up by the smell of fresh pancakes. I ran to the kitchen without even changing my pajamas. I haven't seen my dad this happy in a long time. When I asked what time he came back, it turned out that he hadn't spent the night at home again. He was out with Amber all night, and then I exploded. I told him that she only wanted money from him. I wanted to tell him about the debts and loans, but he abruptly cut me off. It was the first time I'd seen my father so angry. He said that he understood that I decided to come up with some hooey about Amber out of jealousy, and sternly added that I better not get involved in adult matters that I don't understand yet. I couldn't hold back my tears. But Dad, what about... He came up to his senses and began to speak more softly, but I didn't back down. I kept saying she was trying to trick him. I had just started talking about the messages when Dad said that Amber and I needed to get to know each other, and we were all going to paintball together. Well, perfect. We ran into Amber's ex on the paintball field. You should have seen her face at that moment. Her ex began to bully my dad, calling him a baby and child. How dare he? Amber immediately answered him and he blushed and left. For a second, I even respected her, but only for a second. I've seen all the evidence. And I shot Amber, but I accidentally hit her in the head. I did want it, but she immediately left, saying that she had to teach someone extra classes. We didn't play anymore because Dad was in a bad mood. I felt guilty and tried to apologize, but he interrupted me and said that I had disappointed him. It hurt me. The next day I came to school in a bad mood, but my stupid classmates jumped on me right from the doorway. Like I got an A in literature because I'm now the teacher's favorite. Were they even serious? I couldn't bear it and ran away into the hall. Someone was yelling in the principal's office. I overheard, and I think the principal was scolding Amber for the rumors that were going around about her. A minute later, Amber came out crying. Yeah, I wasn't the only one who got sick of it. She came over and offered a truce for my father, at least for a week. The thing was that Dad had a birthday in a week, and Amber wanted to throw a surprise at her house that Dad and I were supposed to attend. I did want to put up with her, but it was a great chance to establish a relationship with Dad and show him the messages, so I agreed. On the eve of his birthday, I prepared a special gift for my father. A poem. Dad kinda thought out a little, and when I said I also wanted to apologize to Amber for that shot, he was really happy. It was a big surprise. Amber had all Dad's colleagues and friends in the house. When did she get to know them? While everyone was hanging out, I slipped away to look for a laptop with a cherished chat. I just found it and was about to leave when I bumped into Amber at the door. She saw the laptop in my hands and immediately started clucking. Like you can't break into someone else's room like that. Blah blah. Did you have the right to break into my life? Dad came running at the noise, barely restraining my joy. I showed him the chat. See, Dad, I told you, all she wants from you is money. You should have seen the teacher's face. She blushed, confessed her debts and loans, and said she didn't want to involve him in her problems. She can handle everything on her own. Yes, of course. Sure, we believed you. But my father said he believed her. He closed the laptop without even looking at the chat and explained that Amber was in a difficult situation. Again, that dry tone, as if we were strangers. I couldn't stand it any longer and ran away. I hate Amber. Even at home, I couldn't hide from this snake. Dad used their picture as a wallpaper on his laptop. I had to do something. And then I got an idea. It may be cruel, but I decided to leak a photo of Dad and Amber kissing in the internet from an anonymous account. Let everyone think that the teacher seduced the student. I think neither the school nor the authorities will be happy about this. And Amber will get punished. Yes, Dad, I used your illness, but it's for your own good. I'm sorry. In the morning, I was wildly embarrassed and left for school early. There was a chaos. The photos spread all over the city. Journalists and police arrived. Was she really going to jail? Suddenly, Dad appeared. When he saw the crowd, he asked what was the matter. A minute later, the police were escorting Amber out. She looked very confused and I couldn't look her in the eye. Dad still didn't understand what had happened. While we were waiting for Amber at the station, my shocked dad was reading an article on the internet where there was a photo of him and Amber with a headline, "Photo of a teacher kissing a teenager turned out to be fake." He couldn't understand who could have done such a cruel thing to him, and I was embarrassedly silent. Soon, Amber was released. The cop asked her if she would file a libel complaint, but she refused. She knew I was behind it, though. I was afraid that she would tell father, but all Amber told Dad was that they needed to break up, and then she quickly left. After that, Dad called her and even came to her place, but she ignored him. Dad got depressed and was all because of me. Did he really fall in love with her? I brought up the chat theme once again, and then I found out the truth. It turns out that Amber didn't need the money. She wrote about her mother, who needed an expensive surgery, and she had already gotten loans when Amber and Dad got together, so it turns out that her feelings were sincere. I tried to find Amber at school to apologize, but the scandal was so big that she was fired. I steeled myself to tell my dad the truth. I was the one who did it, and I was the one who made Amber leave Dad. I'd never spoken so sincerely in my life as I did at that moment. Dad was in shock, but most importantly, he forgave me. He immediately called Amber, and we found out that she was going to fly to Seattle. Her flight was today, and we rushed to the airport. There were only 5 minutes left before the boarding was over. But we made it! Amber heard me and Dad calling her name. She dropped her tickets and ran into Dad's arms. And then without a word, they hugged me. And then I realized that she wasn't my enemy, and my desire to protect my dad was actually jealousy. We've been living together ever since. Amber and I had a lot in common. For example, love for cats, hams, and of course, for Dad. Quite a nice set, isn't it, Fuzzy?